welcome to My Career in Data, a podcast where we discuss with industry leaders and experts how they have built their careers. I'm your host, Shannon Kemp, and today we're talking to Dr. Duru Ahanotu from Ahan Analytics.
With a robust catalog of courses offered on demand and industry-leading live online sessions throughout the year, the DATAVERSITY Training Center is your launchpad for career success. Browse the complete catalog at training.dataversity.net and use code DVTalks for 20% off your purchase.
Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp and I'm the Chief Digital Officer at DATAVERSITY, and this is My Career in Data, a DATAVERSITY Talks podcast dedicated to learning from those who have careers in data management, to understand how they got there, and to talk with people who help make those careers a little bit easier. To keep up to date in the latest in data management education, go to dataversity.net/subscribe. Today, we are joined by Dr. Duru Ahanotu, sole proprietor of Ahan Analytics. And normally, this is where a podcast host would read a short bio of the guest, but in this podcast, your bio is what we're here to talk about. Duru, hello and welcome.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you. And it's good to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for sharing your story with us today. So tell me, you are the sole proprietor of Ahan Analytics. And for those who may not know, what type of business is Ahan Analytics?
It is a data analytics consulting company. It's the result of a passion of mine. So I focus on, classic data analytics, but it's also an umbrella for a bunch of other things that I like to do. And maybe we'll get into it later if it is related to the career trajectory that you're interested in hearing about.
Absolutely. Well, as the sole proprietor, what is it that you do?
So I'm a one-man show, and but I do work with, for instance, so one of the things that I do in my data analytics consulting is I'm working with another consulting company called Tag One, and I'm helping them stand up a data analytics practice. So I've been with them for, 3 years now. And I've done basically data science, data strategy, a technical lead, kind of all the things. You would imagine that a one-person show, I have to roll up my sleeves and take on, the entire spectrum of activities.
Oh, yeah. So as the sole proprietor, and it obviously as a data consultant, you're working with data all day long.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you do differently for your own data how do you work with data in your own job?
Yeah. So I have done a bunch of different things. So I'll just take you through maybe a few examples. So for instance, one of the first projects I worked on with Tag One actually looked like a standard data analytics project where we were going to come in. It's a large membership-based organization. Their data ecosystem needed to be overhauled. And we had to do a gap analysis to figure out, okay, what is the centralized data, or what is the data warehouse that we're going to implement? How's the architecture going to look? How are we going to make analytics available to the staff members? And then how are we going to structure the schemas for recording important membership information and then making available in different reports and that kind of thing through, the way that we create the data workflows or the pipelines. But interestingly enough, the first thing we had to do was actually interview a bunch of people, and that took many months. And so actually I ended up, along with my partner, she was a business analyst at the time, working alongside me. We did a lot of interviews and we ended up collecting a lot of data. And this was back in 2023. So ChatGPT had just come on the scene. And lo and behold, I had the idea, hey, we have all of this data that we've collected essentially in the form of responses to all of our interviews. Let's use ChatGPT to categorize and classify it to make it easier for us to generate the gap analysis and the insights that we use to later generate over 100 projects, proposed projects, I should say, for this particular client. And of course, I had to anonymize the data and all that kind of thing because we didn't want, to put that stuff into ChatGPT. But that's like an example of sort of the kind of on the spot, kind of creative ad hoc things that I also get called to do just based upon what is the existing client need that we've discovered.
Oh, I love that. So when you think about analytics, you're thinking just about spreadsheets and, like it just, that's like the first visual that it triggers, right? And charts. And you said you spent the first, few months interviewing people. And I assume, but correct me if I am wrong, that was to understand the business and what the needs were in order to curate the data.
Correct. So this was very fundamental stuff. We had to understand what were the pain points people were experiencing dealing with the existing data ecosystem. So these are people, think of these as people who are users or consumers of data within the organization. And their pain points just ranged across the entire spectrum of things you can imagine, from data quality to data availability to understandability to relevance, just all the things. And they even had organizational things that were related to data that we had to discuss and sort of parse out as well. So it was all the things.
And I want to dive into this a little bit and just kind of
Sure.
hover on this point a little bit, because I think that, from what I've heard, that this is one of the biggest steps that's missed.
Mhm.
That
Yes.
communication, that question, that what's your pain point? What are you using it for? Instead of just building a data ecosystem and then telling people how to use it, you actually
Hmm.
try to understand first how they're using it, where they're struggling in order
Yeah,
to make it user friendly.
that's correct. Because we had a lot of assumptions going in based upon what we were initially told was the issue and what they needed. And we came up with a totally different understanding of what they needed after actually talking to the people. And yes, interviewing people takes a particular communication skill, and it's something that I've groomed over the years. I like to think of myself as not being a typical engineer, so I'm sort of multidisciplinary in that sense. And one of the things I like to do is talk, do public speaking, podcasts. So I really enjoyed talking to the people, and it opened my eyes to the different ways in which people were using the data or trying to use the data in this organization. And that's sort of the reality check on our objectives that we had going in at the beginning. And it also helped to better inform the final product. And it's actually still ongoing. So we're still working with them. It's going to be a long road, but it just gave us a much better starting point and understanding, and also helped to introduce us to the wide range of people in the organization as well.
Do you find it's hard to get buy off on that first step, that from companies to take the time to do that first step?
It can be, not this particular client where we've had trouble buying in, is different parts of the phases. But so, for instance, I finished a project with a client, a totally different client, a small company. They do streaming, video streaming, and there I had all of maybe a few days to talk to people. And everybody is just under the gun. They're stressed out. They're working way too many hours, so they don't have a lot of time to really dive into a lot of the things I wanted to talk about. So in those kind of cases, fortunately, given my experience, and they actually were using a data platform that I already knew, a data analytics platform that I already knew, I was able to take on a lot of the self-learning in that case and really try to make myself or unburden them from me, and sort of work a lot, very independently. Kind of give me the starting point. I'll run with it, and then I'll do a check-in, and then we can iterate that way rather than spending hours upon hours of doing the typical kind of initial investigations and data exploration with the client that I would prefer to do.
Very nice. Okay, well, let's get into how you got to where you are today and how you've developed some of these skills. So tell me, Duru, is this what you wanted to be when you grew up? Is this when you were 6 years old? Like, did you think to yourself, I am going to grow up and be the sole proprietor of an analytics company?
Well, absolutely not. When I was 6 years old, I knew about dinosaurs, and my what was it? Well, my first and second grade teacher was the same. She really opened my eyes to science, and so I thought, well, maybe it would be great if I did something big in science and solve some big problems. So that was what was on my mind. Of course, back then, had no idea about data, had no idea about data science or anything like that. That really wasn't a thing in the school
Yeah.
ground at that time. And actually, what's funny is I take you through my career arc. I was doing data management and data analytics sometimes without really even appreciating or understanding it until little later in my
Right.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll give my starting point when I was in grad school. So I got my PhD at Stanford in what's a department that's now called Management Science and Engineering. At the time, it was called Engineering Economic Systems. And my thesis, the professor who ended up being my thesis advisor was a co-founder of a startup. And I don't know if you remember or back in the 90s, knowledge management and expert systems were a big thing. And so this software company had its own expert systems platform. And my job, I worked on the side of the automotive side, and we were implementing this platform to help diagnose problems with robots on the automotive floor to help the technicians get faster and faster at fixing problems. So that was my specialty back then. But if you had asked me, am I doing data management, data analytics? I would have said, what? What are you talking about? What is that?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I sure didn't appreciate how that stuff was going to become the sort of the progenitor or the genesis of today's, generative AI and all of that stuff. I wish I really had stuck with it. I even bought some books on AI back then, but it
Mhm.
wasn't the path that I ended up taking, unfortunately. So that was really what started my career. Um, and when I graduated, I just got pulled into management consulting. So this is where I first started to gain those skills of consulting, right? Being able to talk to people, understand businesses very quickly. And the way I got into that was not a colleague, a classmate of mine in grad school had gotten a job at this boutique management consulting company. And he said, hey, we need some people. I decided to join. And was there for about 3 years and basically saw all sorts of different companies. One of the most fun things I did was working with IBM, taking the research paper of a Stanford professor in industrial engineering, uh, basically decoding it for everybody, and then creating. Of course, back then it was spreadsheets. So I created this massive spreadsheet. It was like the big joke of the company at the time. It was like I think almost 100 tabs. And so it ran
Yeah.
very slowly, as you can imagine. This is,
Yes.
early 2000s computing technology. But I
Yeah.
put all of the formulas and algorithms that from this paper into that, and then created a model of IBM's supply chain, essentially. Or I really should say their manufacturing chain. The facility was making computers. So that was something that really directly used my training, back in with my PhD. But again, if you had asked me, well, are you doing data analytics? I wouldn't have said, I definitely wouldn't have said so. In fact, I would have just said, well, no, I'm just modeling. Well, I really thought of myself as a modeler. Um, and now if you really, interrogated what I was doing, you could say, yeah, you're doing data modeling because you have to come up with some sort of schema and structure to the data in order to be able to use it for these models and for the final output. So after 3 years of doing that, another friend of mine, you're going to see this kind of common theme about how I get pulled into different jobs. It's not like I had this master plan. It's sort of someone has a need or someone tells me about something and then off I go. And so that moment came again when a friend of mine from grad school, a fellow student, he had tried to recruit me a year before, and I had pushed him off because, like, I was really enjoying the consulting thing. I'm traveling around the country, and it's just really fun. Um, then I got to the point, I was like, my final product in all of these in all of these clients with all these clients is present PowerPoint presentations. And at some point after 3 years of doing it, just wasn't as satisfying. So when my friend came calling again, I said, you know what? I would really like to work with a product company. And this was a software company again. So, as I said before, I was working with a software company before the management consulting. So now I'm going back into a software company and again, a startup. So the first company was a startup and this is another startup. And this was now joining a company in the ashes of the dot-com bust. And they had managed to survive, but there was one last sort of unfortunate process that they had to go through to retrench and survive. And I came in that kind of turbulence. And what this company did was, at the time, they had a software that was optimizing pricing for components of computers. So you can see again, here comes the computing part of my experience. But over time, and I won't go through all of I was there for 8 years. So there's a lot of stuff that happened with this startup and growing the startup and evolving. But one of the things that we eventually evolved to was optimizing pricing for advertising for web publishers. So back then, well, I should say now, advertising is optimized by algorithms and, auctions. But back then, there were actually price sheets that you would come up with, and then the ads would be characterized by, guess what? There's a schema. It would be the size of the ad and the placement on the page of the ad, and then whether or not what kind of media is played in the ad, and so on. And so this was a schema that, again, I didn't recognize it really as data modeling, but that's essentially what it was. And we had a schema for how to characterize internet ads, and we used that schema to optimize the price for each of those ad units for a web publisher. And I cut my teeth essentially on that. I became the expert for that part of the software. So when we were eventually bought by Microsoft, I made it my mission to make sure that that software survived. But then came the financial crisis, the big, 2009 collapse of the global economy. Microsoft decided to lay off a bunch of folks, including most of the what do you call it? Most of the acquisitions they had made, including us. And so a lot of us ended up losing our jobs. And you can imagine trying to find a job in the middle of the global financial crisis was pretty tough. And that's when I first started my consulting company, Ahan Analytics. I had a lot of leads, but nobody I approached had cash. Like, everyone was just terrified that, they were going to need cash for the apocalypse back then. I mean, when you look back on it, just the amount of fear, we can laugh about it now, but, in the middle of it was a much different experience, of course.
Oh,
So that first instantiation of my consulting company didn't really work out. I gave myself a timeline. I said, if in 6 months it doesn't work out, I'm going to look for a job. But even looking for a job took a while, and I finally found something. Again, through my network, someone in my former software startup knew a person who needed a program manager. Well, what I came to call it now, it's sort of really an analytics uh, business partner at Yahoo. So I interviewed, I got the job, but it required me bringing the family back from Georgia, where I had just moved 5 years before, and now we're back in California. And there I spent 8.5 years at Yahoo. And that's when I finally recognized myself as a data analytics, or I just call data professional. My first role was in a team of program managers and project managers, and each of them had spreadsheets to do reporting. And they were spending so much time pulling data, organizing it into their spreadsheet. Everyone had a different model, of course, and they would then collate all that stuff into their weekly reports. And that took a lot of their time. And I came in there to help them. And what I realized right off the bat is, well, to help them really is just to take all of that work off of their plates, centralize the reporting into one platform, one schema, and let them be program managers and project managers. And so that's what I did. I interviewed. So again, this was me. I'm loving talking to people. So I interviewed each and every one of them. I understood what were their objectives. I, went into their spreadsheets. I understood the structure, understood what they're trying to accomplish, and then I centralized all that. And centralizing meant I found all the commonalities as well, right? It didn't require 7 or 8 different schemas to do it. It required, I think, well, I can't quite remember, but it didn't require as many schemas that were in play to get this reporting done. So once I centralized all that, now I was responsible for doing the reporting for everyone. Of course, I would check in with the project managers and program managers to make sure that everything was accurate. And that lasted for about a year until, and I went through a lot of different reorgs. I don't know if we have time to talk about that experience at Yahoo in terms of having a different manager almost every year or more.
oh,
But within the first year being there, I was shipped off to the centralized data team. And that was the official recognition that I am now a data professional, because our SVP he was SVP of data. And then all of us were data folks. I was in the analytics side. There was a data engineering team, and there was a reporting team, and so on. Oh, sorry, instrumentation team. So, with Yahoo, you have to instrument the web pages that collect the data, and that data, of course, is used to optimize the business. And so that was my official recognition. Hey, I am a data professional. I am in the data team. And from there, one of the many things that I did, and again, you can ask about all, whatever is of interest, but one of the biggest things I did was the SVP gave me, at some point, I was growing a team. Again, through all these different reorgs, my team kept getting bigger and bigger. And finally said, you know what? We need to build a centralized analytics team to serve the global company. And so it took about a year, but I grew the team to about 20. And so I had business analysts, I had data scientists, I had what I just called experimentation analysts. They were essentially data scientists doing A/B testing, and what Yahoo called insights analysts. So all of those were under my team, under one umbrella, and we did all of the reporting, all of the analysis for most of the organizations, the product teams in the company. Now there were other data analytics teams, sorry, in different places. Like finance had its own, marketing had its own, and search actually had its own as well. But my business analysts worked alongside them. Um, but at, but beyond that, we were the centralized analytics team, and that was pretty fun building out that team. But as luck would have it, shortly after I built that 20-person team, like I said, it took me almost a year because hiring was really tough back then. It was really hard, really difficult to find people. And shortly after that, our CEO decided, you know what? I think our data team, sorry, should be decentralized. And so that cascaded through the entire data team, and we were told, all right, you all are now being disbanded. And it was a different kind of reorg because we were given the opportunity to find places for ourselves. We weren't, what happens a lot of sometimes in reorgs is they decide who they're going to hire, who they're going to keep, who they're going to fire. But actually, they kept all of us, but we just found different places. And of course, for most of my team, everybody found a place where they were already working, with our stakeholders, our business partners. But me as the manager of the team, as the leader of the team, I kind of had a choice. It's like, well, I don't really know where I fit. And so I told myself, well, let's use this opportunity to do something totally different. I went to marketing, no experience in marketing whatsoever. Decided, you know what, let's meaning me, give that a try. And I went over there and I took on another challenge, which was I took direct ownership of the data engineering team, that the part of the data engineering team that came over to marketing to support the work that they had been doing from the centralized team. And because no one else in marketing really had that kind of experience, they said, well, why don't you lead the data engineers? And that was quite an experience because all of these data engineers. So again, if you talk about how do people get into their careers, none of these people grew up thinking they were going to be data engineers. They were all software programmers. But over the course of their careers, they had come one way or another into data and found out that they really loved data. And so they were data engineers by sometimes choice, but sometimes circumstance. But I had to manage them like software engineers. And I remember the first meeting I had with them, I had to be honest, like, look, I am not a programmer. I took one intro course in college and I had enough of computer programming. So, but I am here to learn. And I was just humble and I had some humility, said, I'm going to learn from you all. I'm going to learn your lingo and I'm going to do the best job that I can. I think I've done a good job leading teams before. I think I can lead all of you as well. And so then in marketing, I had a data science and data engineering team for the length of my time, remaining time at Yahoo. So I'll take a breath there. I think that's halfway through.
Well, I love it. There's a lot going on so far. Let me, so why, let me just ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
When in your first consulting gig, you mentioned that, you learned a lot of communication skills. Was it just on the job learning, or did you do something extra to learn those skills, or was it through mentorship, or was it through, how did you gain those skills?
Right. The thing I didn't mention is when I did my dissertation, I should have mentioned this. When I did my dissertation, I did field study as part of my dissertation. at AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. And there I interviewed a bunch of semiconductor techs, the people who are in the clean rooms. And I started my skills from there, interviewing technical people and
Mhm.
distilling that into information. When I was at the management consulting company, they did do a lot of trainings. I remember public speaking was one of them. I had mentors. There was the company itself had its own way of doing things that I had to learn. And there were, of course, experienced consultants who I looked up to and emulated the skills and the lessons that they had. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things of being a management consultant in that environment was being able to drop yourself into any business environment and learn the business, whatever it is, very quickly, and be able to apply some sort of intelligence to the problem that that particular client had. So that was both on the job training and also some, design training that the company did.
Oh, that's very, very nice. Um, and I'm still envisioning this uh, workbook with 100 spreadsheets. Um, I know I have a very macro heavy, 20 sheet spreadsheet that is very slow in today's world. So I can't imagine how slow it was.
I kid you not, it was like a running joke in the whole company. It was great.
Sure, I imagine it was fantastic. Like that's dreamy. I have an analyst background, so I'll live in that world. I love that. But then jumping forward throughout a lot of your career, you've made a lot of big leaps.
Yeah.
Friends invited you into different jobs that you really weren't necessarily looking for.
Right.
And then most recently, you're talking about jumping into marketing, something that you've never done before. So when you start these new roles that you weren't necessarily going after or preparing for, you know, um, especially that last sleep, you
Mhm.
know, what, how did you start those jobs? Um, without, what did you do to ramp yourself up? I guess is the question.
Yeah. So, as a data person, I kind of have this, I guess, for lack of a better term, this universality of, if data's involved, I can do it. I can figure it out. And given my interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary, however you want to term it, background, I just felt comfortable moving, in many different spaces. I could speak directly to marketing. Um, it was as simple as, again, talking to all my marketing colleagues and being open to listening and being interested in their jobs and learning from them. And marketing was actually easy in that way because unlike a lot of the other environments, the engineering or technical environments I had been in, marketing folks were very gregarious. They loved to talk and talk and talk. Talking was their thing. And that's so marketing was a very social environment. And so it was, I was just soaking up stuff like a sponge. And I really understood that contrast most most poignantly when I was dealing with my data engineers who would only worked in technical environments. And for them, sometimes that, oversharing, very social environment was uncomfortable sometimes. It was a totally different world for them. And so I was straddling, both of those worlds. So yeah, so for marketing, it was very easy to do that ramp up because everyone loved to talk about their jobs and the problems that they were facing. Um, and I learned a lot too because I was fascinated by the way in which they presented information, and it really challenged me in terms of, well, how do I translate? This is the first place where I really was challenged to make data easily interpretable by people who are not data professionals, right? So a lot of the marketing folks are great at presenting, they're great at marketing, they're great at making compelling cases for buying or selling things, but data itself wasn't natural. And so I was working in a place where data didn't come naturally to everyone around me. And so that was a great lift as well in terms of my skill set. And it's something I take with me today when I'm working with data analysts. I always emphasize, look, 50% of your job is going to be technical, but the other 50% is going to be communications. You could be as brilliant and as smart a data person as you want to be, but if you can't communicate it in a way that's compelling and that people can understand and interpret, you might as well not know what you're talking about. And so that was an important lesson for me in that job. Yeah, and it was a big help. Yeah.
And I think too, for so many who maybe have not touched the marketing world, there's so much data to be analyzed in marketing.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was amazing. Yeah,
so much, just not just external data, customer data, how your marketing's performing. So much data.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love that it was a stretch goal for you that you wanted, and that you continue to grow by choice.
Visit dataversity.net and expand your knowledge with thousands of articles and blogs written by industry experts, plus free live and on-demand webinars covering the complete data management spectrum. While you're there, subscribe to the weekly newsletter so you'll never miss a beat.
All right, so tell me what's next.
Okay, well, now let's do part 2.
Yeah.
So, career arcs are full of ups and downs. I'm going to focus on most of the ups, but I'll just essentially say my time had essentially come to an end at Yahoo, and I looked for another job, and I ended up at dictionary.com. And that was another old internet company. It wasn't by design that I ended up there, but it was an environment where I was able to find another position. And now I was a much smaller team. At the time I joined, there were 3, let me think. Oh no, I had 3 analysts working under me. Mostly 2. Unfortunately, one of them he was gone a lot because he had some family stuff going on. So it was a much smaller team, but it was centralized. So my team owned everything about data in the company except for data science. So there was a separate data science team. So we were parallel organizations reporting into the VP of analytics and revenue. And there I got to expand my skill set in terms of all the things that people know about web analytics, but also ad monetization, which was something I brought with me, but it was in another team. But my analytics team had to support them with the raw data. I worked with the product design folks and doing A/B testing. We were responsible for forecasting, something I had never done before. So we had to do forecasts of revenue. And we had to do basically forecasts of all the things that go into revenue, right? Which is all the engagement metrics that you have on a website. And we had to do executive level reporting. So the CEO and the other execs needed their, weekly, monthly, and annual forecasts. And so it was basically, again, it was a position where it was all the things. And I had to actually go through a second iteration of team building, because at one point I had to rebuild the team from scratch, and I had to rehire and build out a full new team. So I had all the experiences there as well. And it was also a very old company that was trying to figure out how to survive in a changing world, a world that was changing very fast around it. And of course, companies like dictionary.com that made the bread and butter was made from advertising, that was also going through a fundamental shift because of data privacy and just the competitive nature of things. And I also learned SEO. I shouldn't forget about that. So SEO was a huge deal for dictionary.com, and that's search engine optimization, just for your audience. And believe it or not, SEO was not a big deal back at Yahoo, because Yahoo was at one point the royalty of the internet. It was on its way down, but it was still the royalty. And SEO was thought of something as, well, helping Google to take the business, right? That was kind of the approach or the mindset. So SEO was a small, tiny part of Yahoo, but at dictionary.com, SEO was practically everything. And I remember my manager, the VP, sitting me down at one point and saying, you know what, we can't afford the consultants that they had hired to do SEO. Can you take this on? And so that was another growth opportunity because again, I'm thinking, well, SEO is about data, right? So can't I do it? And boy, we had a different flavor of SEO. It was very analytically driven. So, there's marketing driven SEO. That's of course important, but ours was very analytically driven in terms of the amount of processing of data that we did, the amount of correlations that we tried to generate in terms of what generated higher click-through rates on search pages. So it was very, very statistically challenging job. And eventually I hired an SEO manager and then, pretty much put everything into his hands. And eventually he did such a great job that he was moved into his own kind of team and then to grow in parallel in parallel to me. So that was another big growth opportunity for me at dictionary.com was really learning the ins and outs of SEO. I learned more than I ever thought I needed to know about SEO.
I understand.
Yeah, yeah. We built some really cool models too. That was really the fun part about it too. Models that probably were being done elsewhere, but I suspect that they were relatively unique to us because it was just survival for us. So we had to do everything and anything we could to figure this thing out. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I can relate. As and Tony, our CEO, said, "Shannon, let's build a website." I said, "Okay, let's start this thing called Dataversity," and and now and now I know so SEO. I know more about SEO than I ever wanted to know, but it's so
Yeah.
important. It is so
Yep, it's
important.
very important. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it helps me now. That knowledge also helps me now in the work that I do for my own
sure.
website and my own publishing as well. So it's come in very handy.
So what's next?
So what's next? All right. So we're almost there at the end, folks. So from dictionary.com, seeing the sort of the writing on the wall again, and my time came to an end. Again, I won't focus on how that all happened, but I decided, I really want to get out of the business of relying on advertising revenue for survival because I could see the writing on the wall is just going to become more and more challenging with time. And the CTO of a fintech company found me and recruited me to come join. Now I'm back to the startup world. So I'm bouncing between startups and old internet companies. Now I'm back to a startup. It's a startup fintech company, very exciting. Their product was basically expert interviews. So they help compile. Again, you can see I wasn't doing any interviewing in this case. I was strictly data because I was hired in to basically build up a data team from scratch. They didn't have a data team and they needed one. And my remit was to hire a data analyst and a data engineer. Actually, the data engineer, I had to convince my boss that we needed to hire data engineers sooner than they had originally planned. And so I built out that very small team again, analytics and data engineering to support all the data needs for this fintech startup. And their main product in terms of data was turning experts' knowledge of financial markets, of companies, of businesses into data that could be shared and sold to other folks who are trying to do investment decisions, basically, from the expertise of other of knowledgeable people in the different industries. That's the best way I can sum that up. And so that was another totally different learning experience because there now I was tasked with coming up with the data strategy. I had to come up from scratch all the ways in which my team was going to work with the different functional groups. They had a data analytics platform that was well hated. I'm not going to mention the name of it because I actually came to like it, but it was well hated throughout the organization. And every time I talked about my plans for data in the company, folks want to know, when are you going to get rid of that thing? And I said, well, okay, hold on. We can't just unplug the system. There's a process that we have to put out. So I learned very quickly. When I talk to people, I need to lead with, here is my transition plan, right? And so there was that transition plan, but I also had to work out how to take some of the data work off of other folks that had been doing it in absence of having a data team. So for instance, there was an operations person, there was a person in finance. all these folks who were doing different aspects of what we would think of as the work of data professionals. And I took those on where it made sense and left other things that were very specialized to their group. So left that with them. And so that work lasted for a little less than a year. And that when that time came to an end, that's when I said, you know what, really want to work for myself. And I just happened to get another opportunity, another former college friend of mine from undergrad, not grad, had this need, and that need was Tag One. So I led with the Tag One story. And I told her, at this point in my career, I'm not interested in a full-time job. She said, that's great because most of the people at this company are contractors. I said, fantastic. That works for me. And so that's how I established my consulting company, and I've been trying to grow it ever since then.
Oh my gosh, what a rich career. I really
It's
like
been a
it.
roller coaster.
Yeah, but so much experience and and I love how you kind of went from operational efficiency, right? So engineering operational efficiency to uh engineering data and helping people understand the data that they're working with. Um, so tell me, what has been your biggest lesson so far in your career?
I've honestly learned a lot of lessons. So if you'll just humor me, I'll give two big lessons. The first one is you can hear from my career narrative that it's when opportunities present themselves, just go do it. Um, and be confident that your training has prepared you as a data professional to take on a lot of different roles. And it's worked out. And every time it worked out, I built out my confidence more and more and more that this is really my growth. My particular growth path is that when those opportunities come, I grab it and I make the most of it. And it's really been that approach to career and life has really worked out pretty well. The second one, though, I really learned that managing teams and leading teams is itself a science. And I sort of learned that a little bit in grad school because I had to do some organizational design work as a part of my own dissertation. But I really learned it once I decided to move from individual contributor to management when I was at Yahoo. And I really, because again, still an academic at heart, I took managing as another learning challenge, and all the opportunities that Yahoo gave me to learn about management, I took. And in marketing, they also gave us some opportunities as well. And in all of that, I learned so many valuable concepts. And I'll just take one of the ones that I found so important is assuming when you're talking to people positive intent. That was really stuck with me. And in the training that I did, they claim that when you approach people with positive intent, it reduces the odds of misunderstandings. And it has definitely worked like magic. It's also worked like magic in me helping other folks to diagnose why communications are broken down between them and helping them to resolve their issues. And I think it's really benefited me a lot in terms of leading teams and leading people and helping to establish strong communications. Like I said earlier, 50% of every data professional's job is probably going to be communications. Well, positive intent is one of those important parts of having constructive and robust communication skills. So,
Tell me a little bit about positive intent. Give me an example.
yeah. So particularly, I'll give it in a manager team person, communication. So what can sometimes happen is your team member has done something wrong, outcome wasn't what you expected, maybe it didn't come up to par, and you, as a manager, you say, "Oh, this person's just incapable. They don't know what they're doing," or whatever, all the ranges of things that managers can think about why that team member isn't up to the task of doing this job. So when you sit down to have that conversation, you could either already have those conclusions in your mind that I'm dealing with someone who's an underperformer, or which is the more constructive way, is to have positive intent that this person didn't approach this work, assume that this person didn't approach this work to underperform, to mess it up or to screw it up, but that there could be something else. And so I'm here to listen. Talk to me about the work. Talk to me how you went from, A to B to C and so on. And then we will discuss, well, I expected this and instead you did this. So can you just describe to me why we weren't able to achieve that? And just listen to what they have to say. And based on what they say and what you learn from them, then, start to, piece together the puzzle or connect the dots, and always talk to them about your own thinking process and check in. Okay, am I right? Is this correct? Am I understanding this correct? So that's how positive intent will change a conversation. And at the end, and what I found is at the end, yeah, this person did not intend to screw this up, and there was just something that, I'm thinking about a particular case, but it was just something that sometimes is bad luck. Sometimes things just didn't work out. Sometimes there just wasn't enough time. We didn't plan for enough time originally, or whatever the case may be. So that's one example. Well, very genericized example of a real case.
Well, that's a great example. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'd be helpful to a lot of people. Um, so tell me, you keep talking about how you really worked with data your whole career,
Yeah.
whether you knew it or not.
Mm-hmm.
What is your definition of data?
So as you can imagine, I sort of took data for granted, like it doesn't require a definition. But when pressed to the wall, I would define data as basically the quantification or the classification of information. And I don't mean that definition as a cop out, because information is, that whole supply chain of things: information, data, knowledge, wisdom. And I would say in the business context, it's not wisdom, it's insight. Um, because information could just be spilled on the floor, a bunch of numbers, bunch of letters and stuff, documents. But data is the way of quantifying that so that you can draw meaning from it. And it's some sort of quantification or classification. I say classification because it doesn't have to be numbers. It could be labels, right? And of course, as we know, with today's AI and machine learning, labeling and categorization is so important, for data. So yeah, that's how I would define it these days. Yeah. Now that I'm more aware that I'm dealing with data.
Hello, it. Tell me, especially as a manager, do you see
Mhm.
the importance of data management and the number of jobs working with data increasing or decreasing over the next 10 years, and why?
Yeah, everybody's wringing their hands about this, right? Because of AI. And I'm also trying to keep up with the conversations, and it's very easy to get discouraged because there's so many people who want to make headlines and say really extreme sensationalistic things about how we are all going to become slaves of robots, or the central AI in the future. And what I would say to folks is my working assumption is that we're going to be even more needed in the future, but just not needed in the ways in which we're used to being needed in the past. The fuel of AI is going to be data, and high quality, well classified, well structured data is one part of the fuel. But even when you're putting unstructured data into AI, having some sort of awareness of how to deal with unstructured information in a way that generates insights is going to be so valuable to companies who, if they just trust the black box, are going to run into a lot of trouble, because AI, as it still stands right now, is not deterministic. It's very stochastic, right? And in a stochastic system, if you don't have an awareness of the probability distribution or the range of outcomes, or how to even deal with those range of outcomes, particularly the tail risks, companies are going to be in trouble. So I think it's probably already started, but I think folks like us are going to be even more needed in the future. Now, will it still be called data management? Just who knows? I mean, these labels, sometimes we throw them around a lot. But at the end of the day, it'll still be data management because it's still going to involve data, right? But yes, data management will become even more important. And I'm going to put my stake in it over the next 10 years based on what I know and what I can see. Um, and I think those of us in the field should just have that confidence that, oh, sorry, just not just the confidence, but the flexible thinking to say, okay, what are the new ways in which I am now going to add value in a work environment that's steeped in AI systems, steeped in agentic systems that need to be coordinated, that need some sort of governance, that need security, right? Data security is going to be even more important because you have all these agents just going on doing their thing. When they get hacked, are you going to know when they're hacked? Are you going to know when when the reasoning has been corrupted? If you're not a data professional, if you're not an expert in data management, it may go completely unnoticed. So that's going to be my claim.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I totally agree. Yeah, things may look different. Our jobs maybe change a little bit. Some things are going to become automated, which is
Yeah.
amazing and great. But if you don't know what's going in and coming out and have no way of like analyzing what's coming out, whether or not it's accurate or not, you're in trouble. Don't
Yeah.
have that human in the loop.
Yes, or I heard one person say it's not actually human in the loop, it's AI in the loop. Like we're still going to have
Oh yeah,
human systems, but we're
yeah.
inserting AI into those. So it's actually AI in the loop. And I think if we have that perspective, I think it actually will also help people appreciate just how important data management is going to continue to be in the future. We are still in charge. At the end of the day, we have to take responsibility and accountability for the results at the end of the day too. It's going to be humans, right? So it's AI that's in the loop. And when you talk about automation, I also like to remind folks that we have been trying to automate things for, generations. The automation itself is nothing new. AI did not invent automation. And our lessons from every age as we automate things is that we become more prosperous. We actually relieve ourselves of a lot of drudgery to open up spaces for new things that we never could have imagined possible. And I think the same thing is going to happen as we automate things with AI is things that we could never believe possible right now as we're sitting are just going to open up and who knows what they'll be. So let's be open to those possibilities and grow along with the opportunity.
Oh, I agree. And I love the way of thinking about that AI in the loop. That's a great way to reframe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't take credit for it. I heard it on one of the many podcasts I listened to.
Well, we'll just keep spreading the word.
Keep spreading the word. Yes.
Oh, Duru, it's been such a pleasure hearing your story today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure being here. It's been fun talking about it. I never get, as you could probably tell, I never get tired talking about the lessons I've learned in my career.
Oh, it's so important to share. So I really appreciate it. I know that people listen to the podcast and learn and, get a different perspective and ideas of what they can do with data and how
Mhm,
they can get into a career in data management.
mhm.
So thank you so much. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if somebody wanted to learn more about your company, your consulting company, and where would they go to learn more?
So of course I have a website and that is ahan-analytics.drduru.com. Or you can simply go onto LinkedIn and find me. I'm so far still the only Duru Ahanotu on there. So you can find me that way. And then all the links are there as well.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. And we'll post those links, to the podcast page for sure.
Oh, great.
Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it and learned a lot from you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. It's been great being here.
Oh, and for all of our listeners out there, if you'd like to keep up to date on the latest in podcasts and the latest in data management education, you can go to dataversity.net/subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, everyone. Thank you for listening to DATAVERSITY Talks, a podcast brought to you by DATAVERSITY. Subscribe to our newsletter for podcast updates and information about our free educational webinars at dataversity.net/subscribe.